Part 2. We discussed subject matter last week, and I talked about the author, Umaswati Swamiji, and briefly mentioned chapter-wise, what is what in which chapter. So, a little bit more about all these things, because I know Sandeep Bhai is going to start the book itself from next week. So, I'll be careful not to encroach in his territory. So, but we'll carry on with same thing more or less, but in my own way, The book is divided in 10 chapters. That's a guide. The last one is about moksha. That's the ultimate goal. So all this material, right from the beginning, that is Samyak Darshan, Guna, Charitra, and Moksha Marga. So how to attain moksha, how to walk that path is the main subject matter of the book. So if we are looking for, say, moksha, then that's the ultimate goal, of course. So how to achieve, the ways to achieve it, the tools to achieve moksha, and what sort of knowledge we require to achieve that. And the faith and conviction and determination in achieving moksha, faith or enlightened worldview is what we call Samyak Darshan. In the last week I mentioned that darshan or gyan or charitra, without having Samyak Darshan, Samyak Gyan, Samyak Charitra is no good yet. So what is moksha? Why do we want moksha? Well, that is the question. Now, moksha is one of the 4 basic things or purusharth. તમે જ્યારે લગ્ન કર્યા હશે ત્યારે 4 ફેરા ફેરા હતા ને, પછી પ્રિસ્ટ શું સમજાવે તમને કે why these 4 ફેરાસ, 4 rounds you are going around the sacred fire. What does it signify? And the priest usually explains that these are dharma, earth, काम, and moksha. So even our routine life, daily life, even during the time of marriage, we are reminded of moksha, that our ultimate goal is moksha. But before we achieve that, or before we do anything about that, there are other purusharth activities. So dharma, earth, काम, and of course last is moksha. So dharma is also a thing we have to achieve, we have to do something about it. So what are the 2 remaining things? If you take dharma and moksha away, there will be earth and then काम. काम अर्थ શું? What is the meaning of काम? In Gujarati we say काम એટલે કામ કરવું. But this is not the meaning here. काम, kamna, that is intense desire, sometimes even lust. But sometimes some degree of calm, desire, wish is good. Otherwise we cannot progress in our worldly life. Monks માટે એના માટે જુદું છે, those who have renunciated everything. But in our life, I mean, you probably want promotion, probably want more money, you probably want this, that, So this is calm desire. And then there is another one, earth. Earth again has got two meanings. Earth in simple Gujarati is earth means meaning. This is not the meaning here. Earth means sampatti, wealth. This is all earth, or whatever is achievable. This is earth. So these are the four main things. We were told that these are the four main purusharths when we get married. So here, Kam and Moksha are the goals. Dharma and Arth are the tools. When one gets married and goes around the sacred fire 4 times, these 4 circumambulations are meant for Dharma, Arth, Kam and Moksha. Kam is the fulfillment of worldly pleasures, and Moksha is the ultimate goal of all jivas. કામ આપણે શું છે એક મેં તમને શું કીધું કે કામ is also desire, but કામ is again is fulfillment of your desire. That is also calm. So 2 things we need, calm and moksha. And what we need is, for moksha we need dharma. Without dharma we can't have moksha. And for calm we need artha. I think that came again. Calm can be achieved by earth, and moksha can be achieved, and moksha can be achieved by dharma. Now, it's a difference in these two. Calm is the dependent happiness. We do get happiness, but that happiness depends on material things. Right? And moksha is the ultimate. And it's independent of anything. It's a pure, blissful state. That is moksha. It doesn't depend on any acquisition. Whereas calm depends on acquisition. More about moksha. Definition. Now this is very good definition given in a Gujarati book by, I mentioned Pandit Sukraji last week. He was a blind scholar, living in Hyderabad, and was teaching in Mahavir Jain Vidyalaya, when I studied, but he was well before my time anyway. So this is Pandit Sukraji's definition of moksha. When there is no reason left for bondage of karma, and when the soul attains final stage of purity, this is called moksha. This is very good definition or very good explanation given by Pandit Sukraji. He says further, this also means total detachment coupled with omniscience. That is moksha. So moksha કોને કહેવાય એ આમાં પંડિત શુક્લાજીએ બતાવ્યું છે. It's in Gujarati, in his Gujarati book. In moksha, soul attains final blissful state from where there is no birth and rebirth. We all know this, isn't it? That's the final state. No birth, no death. And the soul resides on top of the universe in the Siddhasila in a blissful state. What happens to soul? Once it is separated, once it achieves nirvana, final moksha, what happens to it? It goes on top of the universe where there is a Siddhasila and it rests there in a blissful state. That's where it is. One young boy, when I was teaching quite a few years ago, asked me, that's boring, isn't it? Staying there on the Siddhasila, doing nothing. That would be boring. I don't want that. So, because it's just pure soul living there. Not even living is not probably a proper word. Staying there on the Siddhasila. That is moksha. Even some of the people I knew, one famous businessman and a very famous personality in Jain Fort, Dixon Bay Garden. What his name, isn't it? Very famous man. Yes, given away millions of rupees in various charitable things here. Once I was sitting with him and we were having tea and other things, and he told me, Vinubai, I don't want books. Being such a great man, he's saying frankly, no, I don't want books. I want to come again, again and again and serve people. So that was his thing. But the books is a different thing. No body, no karma, and final state. So what is blissful state? And no desires, no detachment. Even Lord Buddha, he mentioned this thing. Imagine 4 noble truths kida. What is the solution? That there should be no desire. Tanha, Buddhist terminology word said tanha. Tanha means trishna. Trishna means intense desire. So that is what he said. If you have no desire, there will be no misery. But is a blissful state, is it same as happiness? That is the question, isn't it? Is it same as happiness? Because happiness, our yardstick for happiness is different. But I have written here, yes and no, depending on what we think about happiness. But we pursue worldly happiness, material comfort and luxury, and spend our life in acquiring possessions. A lot of people would say that, oh, I am happy because I got big house, big car, lot of these things, very good bank balance, all these things. You would say that I am a happy man, isn't it? Yeah. But is he really happy? Example of temporary happiness. As I said, acquisition of goods, new phone, new car, jewelry, lots of other things, or position, power, Some people think that that's happiness because it's acquiring more and more power, is in control of lots of other things. And prestige. Prestige sometimes brings happiness to a lot of people. They feel nice. The ego is pampered. Imagine you bought iPhone 7 and you will think that, right, I've got everything. I'm happy. This is the modern world, Everything is nice now. You feel happy. What will happen after 6 months? You are traveling in a train and someone opens the metro and there are pictures of iPhone 8, iPhone 8, iPhone 8, iPhone 8, iPhone 8. Or whatever the new model is called. Then following week, someone sitting next to you will have that phone in his hand. And then the following week, lots of people in the office will be talking about this new gadget. And you will think that the phone you have got is very expensive. It's not. You must buy this new one. So, where did this happiness go? It was temporary, wasn't it? And it's never ending thing. And this commercial world, consumer society is geared towards that. They will make you feel that whatever you have got is not enough. And whatever you have got is not modern or the latest one. Same thing about TV, same thing about car. They will make you feel that what you have got is not good. So where to moksha? The very first sentence, of course, Samyak Darshan, Gnan, Charitra, and Moksha Marga. And as I said, Samyak applies to all three. So right perception, right knowledge, and right conduct constitute the path to moksha. Right perception or right faith means the development of inner virtue or energy which helps us distinguish what is right and wrong and helps in developing faith in the tattva. That is again Pandit Shuklaji's definition of right perception or right faith or right worldview, whatever you call it. Because as we discussed, darshan is a very difficult word to translate in Gujarati. So, samyak darshan, right perception, right faith, all these things. So, when you can distinguish what is right and wrong, then you know what is samyak darshan. And when you acquire that a true faith in the tattva, tattva is again what you call tattva in English. Basic reality, entity, essential thing, these are what? This is tattva. Jeev, ajeev. Right. This darshan, gyan, charitra in real life. Anything you want to do, say you want to start a business, you need three things, isn't it? Know-how, faith in yourself, and working for that goal. So again, these are the same thing. Faith in yourself is darshan. Know-how of that business is knowledge. And achieving that, working towards that, that is conduct. So whatever we do is samyak darshan, samyak jnana, samyak charitra. These things you want. A student, when he is preparing for the exam, he needs to say these three things. He must have confidence, faith, that is darshan, so to speak. Then he must acquire knowledge by reading, discussing, revising, that's gnana, and then actually sitting examination and all these things and doing these things is charitra. So again, we need darshan, gnana, charitra for earning money, for acquiring prestige or anything. So in Jain terminology for moksha, we need again these three things. Samyak darshan, samyak gnana, samyak charitra. Darshan is just have a faith. Decide what is right and wrong. That again, Gnan will help you. Because samyak darshan and samyak jnana always stays together. And it can stay together without samyak charitra. But you require samyak charitra, good conduct to achieve moksha. Otherwise, there is no point. If we learn, acquire knowledge, have faith, but without the purusharth, without the work, we cannot achieve moksha. Right, that will be it. I was doing it yesterday, this morning. There's one more thing. I only spent about an hour or so, doing everything, and just come without right. Yes. Last week, I read about artificial intelligence. I'm sure you know about this because you people know more about these things than me, you know. My time has gone. But what is artificial intelligence? Then I was thinking, is it same as Samyak Jnana? It's not definitely Samyak, but is it the ultimate knowledge? Because artificial intelligence, especially what IBM is developing, it's called Watson, isn't it? IBM is developing a program called Watson. Now that program will help you do everything, decide on each and everything. It will diagnose everything, and it will give you what sort of medicine and everything, because it will gather millions and millions and millions of data. And together with your own conditions and other things, and it will give you a whole lot of answers. That's new program, IBM's program called Watson. That's what I was reading last week. So I was thinking, can it replace person's, say, category of knowledge? Can it go up to given none? No, it cannot. I don't know why they give name Watson actually. They should have given another name like Sherlock Holmes. Isn't it? Because Sherlock Holmes would say, elementary, my dear Watson. Isn't it? You know that Arthur Conan Doyle's books about Sherlock Holmes here. That's what he says to his assistant Watson. Right. So, now, this Tattva Sutra is full of good aphorisms, good golden sentences. And the one most famous one is this one, Parasparo Graho Jivanam. It's being used widely everywhere, and it has, even in many organizations' logo, you will see this thing, Parasparo Graho Jivanam. So, you can separate this out. Jivanam is Jiv, or souls. Paraspar is a mutual. That's called Paraspara in and Upagraha. Upagraha again is slightly difficult to translate. Upagraha is dependence. Upagraha is help to each other. All these things called. So the meaning of Paraspar Upagraho Jivana. And Paraspar and Upagraha, that when that two words combine, it becomes Parasparopagraha. U becomes O in Sanskrit language. So that's why it says Parasparopagraho Jiva. Souls render service to one another. I've got three separate words. Jivanam is soul, Paraspar is one another, and Upagraha is service. So the complete meaning is souls render service to one another. Or, in other words, all life is interdependent. Now, this is really a golden sentence, and we can go on explaining, for hours and hours. What do we mean by interdependence? But it's in simple terms. We depend on animals, and animals depend on us, and we depend on rivers and mountains and plants and trees and everything, and they depend on us. That's what interdependence is. And of course, we depend on each other in family and in society. So this is a golden, and this is a mantra for environment. That is why some people say that Jainism talks about environment, which no other religion has talked about like that. In Hinduism, you will find some slokas, Vanaspatayo Shanti and everything. Let there be peace in all trees, let there be peace in water, let there be peace in sky. There are mantras in Upanishad. But what it says here, what about the environment is the best. So, and you will see some very good sentences when you learn. So I thought I mentioned. I haven't got many things. So I'd like to recommend one or two things to you. It's, I don't know if you know about this book as well, Tattva Sutra by Manubhai Joshi, Ketan. You come across this? This is also very good because it will help you teach and understand a few things more. You are probably following by Natchmal Tatia's Dead Witches, yeah? This is also quite good here. And there is one written by Nagin Bhai Parekh in Ahmedabad. This is also very good. These are the English books. Mind you, there are lots of books in Gujarati. But as I said, the Gujarati is a bit difficult. It's especially Pandit Suklaji's book. It's a masterpiece. I wrote a very small booklet quite a few years ago in which I given a chart how to study Tattva Sutra. It's very simple chart, moksha. It has got Samyak Darshan, Samyak Jnana, Samyak Charitra, and again how to acquire Samyak Darshan, how to acquire Samyak Jnana, and there is number as well. As for example, Samyak Darshan starts on chapter 1, sloka or aphorism number 2, then chapter 2, chapter 3, what is in chapter 5. So this might be helpful for, at least for the beginners here. So before we learn the process. And unfortunately I haven't got copy, but I would like to, because all copies will give one copy to you. Of course, someone wants to photocopy or everything, you are welcome to do it. There's nothing in it. I'd like to recommend one book to you. You might have heard the name Abdul Kalam. He's a great scientist, philosopher, and above all, ex-president of India. Who died about a year ago, I think, isn't it? Yeah. And then he came in contact this Swaminarayan Sampraday's Pramukh Swamiji. Pramukh Swami also died about a few months back. Yeah. And what he has written, not just about Pramukh Swami, but his philosophy is very good and it helps us understand Tattva Sutra and a lot of other things. And he has quoted very good sentences from all over the world. Gandhiji, some Greek philosophers, another thing. Rumi, you might have heard Rumi's name, yeah? Great Sufi poet who lived during 13th century, yeah. Rumi is more famous outside the Muslim world. Rumi was a Muslim poet in 13th century, but people read more about Rumi in America than in India because he was a Sufi poet and Sufi were mystic. But in countries like Pakistan and other things, they do not believe in Sufism and even they want to drive out Sufi people, unfortunately. Yeah. So, I don't know, I haven't, because my part was just to introduce Tattva Sutra to you, not more than that, but we can discuss now a few things, and if you have any questions, I'll try and answer them.
I had a question on the origin of Jainism, which is the oldest religion. I read Hinduism is maybe the oldest religion. So did Jainism
Actually,
form from Hinduism or a subset?
no, actually, my view is that no one can really there were schools of thoughts. What we call Hinduism, that this name didn't exist. You know, even Jainism, the philosophy were there, the original philosophy. Then it got divided, the philosophy, Sramana philosophy, Vedic philosophy, all that. But there was no such name, Hinduism, Jainism, Buddhism, all that thing. Buddha didn't say that my religion should be called Buddhism, isn't it? People gave this name later. So it's difficult to say which one came first. The philosophy of Ahimsa, non-violence, was there. The worship of sun god and all Indra and Prajapati and all these things were there. They were there in Iran before the people came to India and started composing everything in Sanskrit. They were in even Zoroastrian religion. Perhaps this religion, Zoroastrianism, that is the oldest religion of the world. And because there are a lot of similarities, even the language was different. There was no Sanskrit language. But then people started moving from Iran and south of Russia and everywhere, came to India. Sanskrit language got developed, but they brought their own philosophy, worshipping sun god, god of rain, god of thunder, god of wind, all that thing. So that's how the Hinduism developed. Then they composed Vedas, first 4 books of wisdom, then gradually composed Upanishads, other books. But similarly, at the same time, philosophy of non-violence, not hurting anyone, was also there. That gradually developed into Jainism and Buddhism. The other philosophy took part of Hinduism. So, of course, being Jain, you would like to say Jainism is the oldest. And Hindus would say Hinduism is the oldest religion. But it's not like that. There's no real answer to that.
When did this whole concept of a soul and actually being free of life and birth come about? I mean, was that part of the Vedic tradition?
It is, yeah. It has been mentioned in many Upanishads. Now, Upanishads are not as old as Vedas. Vedas are the very old scriptures, at least 4,000 years old. That's historians have said. Upanishads were composed later on, but there's a complete philosophy of soul, body, and everything has been written. I forgot the name of the Upanishads. I think it is Katha Upanishad or Chandogya Upanishad, and there are very good examples of soul and body being different and all these things. So there's a gradual development, and Jains, maybe they adopted this thing from them because the philosophy was there always, So that came into Jainism, but Jains developed their own unique theory about karma. That karma is matter. It sticks to the soul, and soul gets polluted. That's why we go through the cycle of birth and death. So as a matter, vargana, karma vargana, that's the unique theory of Jains.
You're talking about happiness and bliss. One could argue, I guess, that you have to have a body to experience happiness.
That's
Right.
the happiness
A soul
we
doesn't
derive from
experience
body.
anything.
Yeah.
Right. A soul on its own cannot experience anything.
No. It's a permanent state. We call it a blissful state,
Yeah.
where there is nothing, no misery, no happiness in the worldly sense, everything. That's the ultimate thing. There are no birth and death. That is what called moksha or parinirvana in the Buddhist terms is slightly different. In Buddhist terms, nirvana is a bit different than moksha. But moksha, is happiness in worldly terms, not in that sense. That is That is how it is described in our books. It's a blissful state, free of all karmas. Our soul is completely free of all states.
But don't you think helping others, helping as a human, we're helping each other, that is a blissful thing as well for a soul? That is also going towards moksha. I would feel by helping somebody in need, whether it's anything, that is helping my soul for that moksha. And
Right. Jainism explains in this way that helping others, doing charity work, that's punyanu-bandhi punya. That means you are doing meritorious deeds. So you will get on a higher stage in the next birth. Yeah. But it won't achieve moksha because you will go through cycle of birth and death. You can do good deeds, you can carry on doing good deeds, and that's a good thing to do actually, yeah. That's why I gave you the example of Dipchand Begani. He said, I don't want to achieve moksha. I want to come back again and again, and I want to serve people.
but surely that's a good thing, isn't it?
It's a good thing as far as we can understand. But as far as Jain philosophy is concerned, good thing is a final freedom from the shackles of body and shackles of all these things. That is what the Jain religion says. So good. Jainism says the best thing is no birth and death. But of course, if you want to be born again, you'd rather be born as a human being and do good deeds and serve other people. Because that's the best thing if you are going to be born again. That's what we wish for, that's what we want.
So Jainism says that you have to detach yourself to get moksha. So in other words, you have to not even help others.
No, that is slightly misunderstood here. Detach yourself means, see, there is one different example. You are allowed to have your possessions as long as you are not attached to it. There is a very good definition in Tattva Sutra. You will come to know that. એમાં એ જ કીધું છે કે attachment is acquisition. Acquisition is not real acquisition because you have acquired, you have got it for whatever reason. But if you are attached to it, this is mine, and if you feel sad if you lose it, and you feel happy when you get something more, that is attachment, and that attachment is not good. So similarly, all attachment, everything, you have to just get rid of it. So you have to serve to earn good punya or good karma, subh karma. But even without being attached to anything, without being egoistic about that thing. Pramukh Swami Desai, I was talking about Swaminarayan Sampraday's head, said one thing, that it is very good to serve people, it's very good to serve others, to do charitable activities, but it should be mixed with some divine aspect in it. It should also serve God. Otherwise, what will happen? Without the name of God, it will create ego in our heart. I will do this, I will serve, I work for my committee, I work for my organization. It brings that, isn't it? This is a pitfall. Yeah. That I am doing this, I am doing charitable work, I am helping hundreds of people. I ran and gathered that much money. But once you decide that I am not doing anything, whatever I am doing is for the love of God and for love of other people, then there will be no ego, nothing. So by all means, we have to help others and always help others. There should be no ego, no attachment. You are doing God's work, you are serving humanity, you are serving God. And once we decide that we are serving God, then our own ego will melt away. I hope I explained.
There are many souls which have gone to Siddhshila or achieved Siddhshila. In what shape and forms do they communicate with each other? Do they recognize each other? What shape are they? Do they need something to carry on forever? Nobody has come from there.
પાછા નહીં આવે.
Nobody has come from there to say how it is.
There is no such thing as communication there. There's no email and WhatsApp and all these things there. So, no, soul is just a pure soul without anything.
But how, going to the question what it is asked, you're saying soul, yes, you all keep on saying soul, soul, soul. But who has seen it? How do we know it?
Our Tirthankar Bhagavan, they were Keval Jnani, barabar, omniscient. And whatever they have said and whatever is written in our scripture, we believe because of our faith. We haven't seen it. We cannot prove this. But we believe it because it is written there. And we believe it because it is written by omniscient people, Keval Jnani Tirthankar. That is why we believe. That is why we do not question. But that's a matter of faith, of course.
I think it's very similar. If you look at a mobile phone, if you talk to a scientist, they'll say that it's all to do with electrons. Who has seen an electron? So I think on the physical plane, obviously if you then were to do some research, you can go and look at a microscope and then find electrons. So obviously there's a difference. So I think with the spirituality, it comes that it's your faith through your scriptures. That no one has seen the soul, but then you have to then make an analogy that if you look at all the modern technology, none of us know how it actually works. It's purely a faith that all this navigation satellite and mobile phones and everything works. It's purely on what we think it's almost magical.
And
Surely there have been mobile phones and everything, it's been experimented.
Yes, so the only difference is that in the materialistic world, there's obviously theory and people can look at the electrons, movements, everything. But for people like lay people like us, it's like it's almost like a magical instrument. So I think same with the spirituality.
Yes.
That
So for me to believe that doing what I am doing as a human, I am doing, that is my moksha path and that is my soul is going to moksha. I would feel that when I'm dead, I don't know when I'll be going after I'm dead.
no one just
No, seriously, nobody would know. So as a human, in this living, in this worldly life, I have done what I have done to attain, and I feel that I would attain moksha in that way.
good. But what I see in my personal life, that of course, yeah, we haven't seen the moksha. We are not sure whether we will achieve moksha. Of course, we are going to achieve moksha, but we will achieve it after maybe millions more lives or whatever, yeah. Because in fifth phase of this time cycle, there is no moksha according to Jainism. But the one moksha we can achieve here is the freedom from raga and dvesh, from kashaya. If we can achieve that, we have achieved, that's a true freedom, freedom from greed, anger, illusion, and ego. This freedom is the real moksha for me here. And we should always try for it. That this is what is helpful in your day-to-day life. It helps us quite a lot. I see it here. It creates samta bhava in it. It calms you down. You are greedy. You are no more greedy in your life. Yeah. This is freedom. No raga, dvesh, no attachment, nothing. No kashaya. So this is what we should try for, because we don't know about the other moksha anyway.
You know, we were talking about the soul, and it is difficult to actually without faith, it's difficult to actually get a concept of it, whether it exists or not. But sometimes I think about it the other way around in the sense that look at our body 1 second before we die, 1 second after we die. Chemically, physically, it's exactly the same. Nothing's changed in our body. But something clearly has fundamentally changed.
Something's gone away from this.
Something went,
Yeah.
right? Because physically, there's not, in that 1 second, nothing changed.
Yeah.
But something must have changed.
Yeah, that's what it
You're
is.
alive and then you're dead.
Your heart stops
And-
beating, that's what's changed.
No, people's hearts stop beating and they're still alive. Right? You're resuscitated.
But that's making the blood flow.
Right. But there is a point between each, whatever the point is, or whether it's the heart stop beating, whether you're alive or you're dead. But that millisecond before or after, chemically there's nothing different. But physically there's nothing different.
You might have read, yeah. You might have read some examples about the, near-death experience, where person came back to life, so to speak, and said that, yes, I was looking at my body, this person was there, this person was there, then my father or mother or wife came, started weeping, all that thing. He exactly described everything what happened. After the doctor said he's dead. But then somehow he comes to life, and then he says everything, whatever had happened. Yeah. So there are quite a few things which science cannot explain or logic cannot explain, and things do happen, things do really happen most of the time.
There was a documentary on BBC some time back where there was this one person whom they took him to, I think, Egypt or somewhere there, and he could say exactly what was there. He had already said, and he was showing them that this is, look, this is, and he could, so like as if he had been there.
That's right.
You know.
I've read quite a few examples like that, Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and that just shows that there must be something.
A little boy was talking about his family, another thing, and village, and they took him there, and he said, "Oh, this is my wife," and but he said everything, every little thing he said.
Part of me also is silly about it because all of this stuff pretty much all happens only in India.
Oh.
Right? You don't hear an African or an American saying these things.
I don't know why, but there are examples,
You got to take it with a pinch of salt.
Yeah, but there are more examples in India, of course, and
Right.
sometimes you wonder why there are more in India
Yeah.
and not here, of course. But there are things which we cannot explain, and I myself have experienced things, I think I mentioned one of the things which I can't explain why it happened, why I was, I went to certain place or what happened, this, that. There's no explanation at all. It just, something happened, something clicked. Yeah.
I mean, even in our Mahavir Bhagwan, we know that there are different words.
In India, Srimad Rajchandra also we had a lot of, past words. Yeah.
So in that case, if the soul is gone after that experience, means the soul has got something that it can see and realize. After that experience, it's saying that I saw my family. So what does that mean?
That is liberated soul. That cannot seek my wife said, brother said, sister said, no, not like that.
I think
It's in near-death experience, the soul is just there, hovering above the body, And when it comes back, well, we only read this in magazines,
But again,
and describes it.
if you're really, if you're rigorous in your interpretation, then you have to admit soul cannot see anything. Only our eyes can see.
Eyes can see, yeah. But somehow they describe everything.
I
That's
know,
what
I know.
happens.
So you need
But
to
it is
be careful.
difficult to hear.
Yeah.
I think what I think is that soul can be like in a very simple term we can describe like all description we are trying to do is through our human the way we understand seeing, enjoying bliss and all that. To me, liberated soul is a form of energy in a very simplistic term. It's just there. We are not like our energy in the universe. We don't see, oh, does it feel, does it communicate with each other, or whatever. It's just that it's energy is liberated. There's no form, there's nothing, there's no bliss. Even probably
There's no form, nothing, no.
It's just a way of making us understand as humans. Because that's the term we associate ourselves all bliss, happiness, detachment is something as words we understand. If you don't use any form of words, it's just a simple energy.
Yeah, everything disappears there, or turning or
You just want to release it, and that's it.
yeah, everything disappears. And that's Pandit Suklaji was saying the definition of books more or less like that, you know. Yeah.
So how do you describe ghost then?
Sorry,
What do you say about ghost?
about
Ghost.
ghost. Ghost man, nothing about that.
Because when we say all these incidents are more common in India, ghost is very common here.
હું તો નથી બોલતો અને શું કામ નથી બિલીવ કરતો I know that because one ghost told me don't believe in us.
But I think this.
No, this fifth era, we've got 21,000 years left. For the fifth era to finish. How long is the sixth one? Because the sixth one is actually, it's just sad. Everything is going to be bad. So how long is that?
Same.
Was the same 21,000
Fifth and sixth are the same time period.
Because then everything starts changing and it works again.
What is 6 page you mean?
They know time period suppose it પાંચમો ને છઠ્ઠો વાળો
After
time.
21,000 years, 5th and 6th are 21,000 years long.
Each one.
Yeah, 5th and 6th
So
one.
we say 21,000 years, is it what our year or is it the Jain? Because I was reading the Agam and the calculations they have are very different. Their days, hours are different, years are different. You know what we call light year is totally different calculations. So is it 21,000 our years or is it 21,000 Jain calculated years?
2000 years since 1 year is gone, it's about, so we're looking at 2000 is gone out of 21.
Yeah, bit more than 2,500 years gone. And still there's a lot more years to go in 5th phase, and there will be 6th again. Then everything will start going up.
But it is what we consider
I think
one
what
solar
your
year.
question is
I'm sorry.
is પૂછે છે કે જે આ years કે છે 21,000 is it આપણે આજે 2000 2001 એ રીતના years ઈ તો સાગર હુકમ ને જે ડિસ્ક્રાઇબ કરે એવા years.
No, I mean, this 21,000 years is Earth years, Abra years. But of course, I can say something more on that one. Okay, Hindu scriptures, Jain scriptures, and Buddhist scriptures, there are different categories of these periods, you know. Like in Hindu, it's a Satyuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapar Yuga, and Kali Yuga. There are 4 Yuga era. While in Jain terminology is completely different, in Buddhist is completely different. So that's what it is anyway. Yeah. In Hindu terminology, according to Hindu thing, it is Kali Yuga right now, the bad period. Yeah.
I think the Muslims believe something similar. Like what they say like after 50,000 years, like you know judgment days and all that, it kind of ties in with 21 plus 21, almost roughly same kind of time frame.
They talk about the judgment day, but I'm not sure if Kerala was near the look of that. I don't know. Yeah.
They talk of something is like happening big day after 50,000 years. So it kind of really ties in with that 41, 42 around the same ballpark.
But in any religion, but say Jainism or Hinduism, Christianity, as the idea of this time scale, idea of earth and moon and sun and all these things, you know, તમારે સમજવામાં ધ્યાન રાખવું પડે. પછી the best thing is what Jainism says for upliftment of our soul. That is the important thing. Doesn't matter બે સન છે કે 3 સન છે, 2 મૂન છે, 3 મૂન છે, whatever, you know. I mean, એ આપણને મોક્ષ માટે એકચ્યુઅલી હેલ્પ નથી થતા. બરાબર છે, શીખવા માટે, કારણ કે તત્વમાં આવી જાય જીવ અને અજીવમાં અને એમાં ધર્માસ્તિકા પણ અધરવાઇઝ અત્યારે એવું લાગે તો એનું પેલું નહીં રાખવાનું. કારણ કે ઇવન ઇન ક્રિશ્ચિયન પીપલ, યુ નો, એ લોકો શું કહે છે કે 7th ડે છે, 7 ડેમાં આમ થયું ને આ બધું છે. હવે દે હેવ એક્સેપ્ટેડ કે ના, વોટ એવર ઇઝ રિટન દેર ડઝન્ટ વર્ક ગુડ રાઇટ નાઉ. ક્રિશ્ચિયન્સ હેવ એક્સેપ્ટેડ ધીસ.
But if you look at, when we're talking about back again, what was the oldest religion and how the religions in India have evolved, it is quite striking that the three major religions all have very similar core beliefs. You know, the Aryan Krishna, yes, but the whole concept that the universe goes through phases is the same in all three.
Yeah.
Right? The concept that body is different from soul is the same in
Yes.
all religions. That there is a same root somehow, somewhere down the line.
Somewhere.
And all of that is very different from Western religion.
It's like all the rivers and streams coming from the one mountain, you know, and then it starts flowing and takes different route and all these things. India in that sense is an amazing country. કે ત્યાં આટલા philosophers, આટલા wise men કે wise women થયા છે. This is very marvelous. તમે જુઓ તો બુદ્ધા, મહાવીરા and lots of philosophers, they are saints. Even in Hindus, so many saints, great philosophers.
Actually, there's a book I've just started reading right now. It's called Incarnations. I don't know if you've heard.
Carnations.
Incarnations.
Incarnations.
The author is Sunil Kulnani.
That's it.
He's written History of India in 50 Lives. So he's basically writing about people which are documented that they existed. And he starts with Buddha, and then Mahavira, and then a lot of others. And it's fascinating. You see the philosophers and mathematicians, and Panini and Aryabhatta and Ashoka, all of these people who are key figures in Indian history. And it's fascinating, actually, to say the philosophers, the richness of it.
Philosophy, the richness. Even right up to Krishnamurti and so many